Welcome, everyone. My name is Abby. I run the New Dawn Art Center here. Happy to introduce you to Vernon McClish today, if you don't know him yet. We met earlier this year. Very proud to be hosting this show here. I've been calling his work timeless and iconic because I think it is. And I wish that I could share it with more people. So I'm happy that you're all here today. And I'm going to let Vern tell you about his history. And, and yeah, very casual, however you want to do this, but we can also move around the room if you want to talk about specific work. And we can do some questions throughout or at the end, however you prefer.
Hi, everybody. I got to tell you, it's been a long time since I've spoken in public, so bear with me. I'm Vernon McClish. I'm from Spencer. I look at these photographs. Last night I was looking at these, thinking about these photographs in my talk, and I want to share, to me, a scary thought. These photographs are 50 years old. So, if you look at them, to me, they look like they were maybe taken yesterday. That's the way our world is. And particularly Appalachia doesn't change all that. Before I do any talking at all about these photographs, and because I'm a photographer, I'm probably going to want to walk around with y'all or walk through the photographs because it's easier for a visual person to talk to his pictures rather than stand and make a speech. Life is full of choices, and we all go down paths in our life, and we choose one turn or the other. And I want to kind of share my life with you up until the time this became important to me, because there are, as I'm sure is the case with everyone in this room, if you look back at your life, there's times that hopefully you made the right decision a lot, but there's also times when we've made poor decisions. I was born in a little town on Lake Erie called Geneva, Ohio, and my father, when I was one, my father bought an acre of land on the GI Bill and a one-room shack, and moved his daughter, my older sister, and me into that shack with my mother. My father, like some of you, your families, spent 4 years in Germany during World War II, and when he came back to Ohio, he had a four or 3-year-old daughter he had never seen. So I don't know if that happens today. It probably does, but he never saw his daughter until she was 3. We moved into this little shack, and I don't remember all of that. And between my uncle and my father, they put a roof on it, and they put a couple of rooms on it, and like many of you, pumped water and had a septic system, and but I got to say that and my sister, my older sister in particular, and I talk about this all the time. When I was growing up, I thought I was rich because of the way my parents raised us. We didn't realize until I went to college that we were on the wrong side of the tracks, but it didn't matter to us. And the people in Appalachia, in particular these people, I feel like they, for the most part, feel the same way, despite the fact that we look at them sometimes and judge them because they don't have a lot of money. So, from high school, I went to college for 1 year in Athens, Ohio, I joined a fraternity. I got involved with all these extracurricular activities, and just so you know, that was during the Vietnam War. So if you didn't go to college, then you went to Vietnam, or you went to the war. So I went to 1 year at OU, and I was a frat boy, and then I didn't have any more money for college, so I hitchhiked across the country to avoid the draft, and as did a lot of young men at that time. And kind of an aside, the hitchhiking was a good choice because I ended up living for 6 or 8 months in a commune in Southern California. Back in the day when I used to have long hair. I don't have much hair anymore. But the commune was neat because it cleaned up and set up for all the rock and roll bands for the Fillmore West. So I got to see everybody that was anybody at the time that came to the Fillmore West in that 6-month period. I got to meet them personally and listen to their music for free and get high with them and whatever else we did back in the day. My favorite memory is meeting Grace Slick, who's still alive. Boy, was she a bitch back then. That's what it is. But she was beautiful and she was talented. So then I think I was talking to my father, or we were communicating, and he said, "Son, you're not going to dodge the draft any longer." So I went to Columbus, Ohio, enlisted in the Army, enlisted to fly a helicopter, and thank goodness it was late in the Vietnam War, so most people that enlisted to do things that were kind of stupid at that time. It was kind of a stupid thing to do. I ended up going to Fort Walters, Texas, and becoming a medic, and was stationed in Germany for 18 months. No complaints about that at all. Now we come to choices that we make in life. One of the choices that I made in life and how it ended up. So a young lady came to Germany to visit me, and I'll never forget it. The commanding officer said, he got to know Ruth. This is my first wife. And the commanding officer said, "You should marry that girl, because then you could move out into the German countryside and really see what the country's like." And being young and stupid, she and I eloped in Germany and moved out in the countryside and lived in a little rental apartment on the Main River. Great experience. Got to hitchhike all over Europe. I haven't got to the choice that was made for me though yet. Got to hitchhike all over Europe. Ruth left Germany. I stayed for a while longer. Bought a motorcycle, explored, like guys do, and then finally returned to Ohio. I returned to Ohio. My wife she had enrolled at Youngstown State University in Youngstown, Ohio. I don't know if anybody in here has ever heard of Youngstown, Ohio, but the only thing it's noteworthy for is what happened, the negative that happened in the early 70s. But at any rate, I came back. Oh, and my sister moved in with us in Youngstown. And I worked at a camera department at a May Company store, and my wife and my sister would party all night, like women will do, or not, people will do. Turning those too much? Is that all right?
Is that good? Yeah.
So here's that choice that somebody made for me that was one of the best choices in my life. So one morning, or one afternoon, Ruth says, "Would you meet me for breakfast at the Perkins Pancake House in Youngstown?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "I'll buy you breakfast." Sounds like a deal to me. So I hopped on my bike and I rode to the Perkins Pancake House, and she was there waiting for me. Probably told you guys this story. And I got my blueberry pancakes, which I always got. And she said, "Oh, Vern, by the way, I have something I want you to look at and then sign." So she took this document out of a folder and slipped it across the Perkins Pancake House table, and it was divorce papers. And we had nothing, so it didn't matter. But she had met a guy in college and would rather be married to him than to me. So that was one of my first choices, which was the best choice that was made for me that could have been made for me. I hopped on my motorcycle, didn't even go back and get any of my stuff, and headed for Athens, Ohio to go back to college. On the GI Bill now, because I had been in the military. And I still stay in touch with Ruth, and we kind of laugh about that whole thing now, although it wasn't very funny at the time. So that's when I returned to Athens, Ohio, which is in Appalachia. And when I got there, and I enrolled, and I bought a school bus, which I lived in for quite a while before I had enough money to get an apartment. When I got there, things were different than they were the first time I went to school. I was older. I did not relate to the kids at all, the students at all. I related to the townies, which we called them in Athens, which were the people, the local people who weren't going to college. And this was a very, very poor part of Ohio, the poorest part of Ohio. It's part of Appalachia. So I started to hang out with the townies. And again, I didn't pick up a camera yet at all. That was not what was going on. I had a lot of townie friends, and we hung out and did things together. I was a chemistry major, doing pretty well, and actually, believe it or not, chemistry back then was a nice thing to have a knowledge of if you were in photography. Did it true, Bruce? And true. So I was a chemistry major, and then my senior year, I met my future wife-to-be, and I decided to become a photographer. So my senior year, I changed my major from chemistry, thinking, why was I a chemistry major? Because I was a medic in the Army. I thought I was going to become a nurse or a doctor or something. That's how I did that. I changed my major, and I really lucked out because an individual named Phil Harrington, who was a Life magazine photographer, was hired for 1 year at OU, and I got to be in his class and study under him. And if you look up Phil Harrington, you'll see there's things that he did for Life for years. And he encouraged me. He said, you should go out into the countryside and photograph all these cool people. And some of the stories that he did were stories about people and stuff. So I grabbed a camera, and I was already cavorting with these people on all the time, so I was kind of part of them. And they opened their homes to me. And it wasn't an idea to make a book or a project or anything like that. The idea was to record my days and my experiences in these people, and that's where these photographs came from. I stayed another year in Athens and worked odd jobs, delivering pizza, and painting apartments, and whatever else we've all probably been through in our lives. And then my future wife-to-be, Janet, said, well, you can stay here in Appalachia and starve to death and be a fine art photographer and just have a great old time, and then goodbye. Or you can get the hell out of Appalachia and start life. So at that point, I got in my Volkswagen van, and this is pertinent to this when I get further down this. When I got in my Volkswagen van on the way to California, which is where everybody went at that time, broke down in Colorado, and spent 5 years in in Denver. Married my wife. I had not even developed these negatives yet, by the way, and these transparencies. They were still on the roll or in a box. Many of them had got lost and damaged. But I still didn't realize what I had at that point. And then Drew can remember this, and actually Drew's can too. I worked in a little camera store in Denver, and Polaroid Corporation approached me and said, "Would you like to come and work for us?" And that turned into a 25-year career and something I'll never forget. Good experience. But people make choices, to say the least. And in my case, I made some of the good choices, I think. And I began, probably 5 or maybe close to 10 years after I left Denver, I started to look through boxes and I found all the rolls of film and all the unprocessed film and started to process it. For those of you with a little bit of camera background, images like that are done on a 4x5 view camera. And a 4x5 view camera, for those of you that don't know what photography is, what you see when it's a big camera, it takes a 4x5 size negative, you get under a cloth, and the picture's upside down on the ground glass. And that's how you take those pictures. Most of the pictures were done that way. The color ones were all done on Ektachrome, which I also processed myself. And at the time, scanners weren't really hadn't quite arrived yet, so what could I do with color slides? Thank God I saved them and didn't throw most of them away. And then I shot with a medium format camera also. Enough about choices and me getting to that point. I'm going to talk about some of these pictures, and hopefully you can see them from where you're at. Because each one of these pictures, I can remember the day I photographed and made them. And they all have stories, and if you look at these little tags that are around, there are stories on those tags. And by the way, yesterday my book shipped from, it's my 4th edition of my book shipped from the printer, and I was going to have it here, but it'll be available if you're interested when it comes in here in the store. And it's black and white photographs of all this stuff, and stories too. But I guess since I'm standing up here in front of everything, and I got to tell you, every year, I return to Appalachia to, how many of you have been in Appalachia? Okay, a few people. Appalachia has 25 million people in it. It has, I wrote this down, I think there's 8 or 9 states that comprise Appalachia, from New York all the way down to Maryland, and only one state, being West Virginia, is all encompassed in Appalachia. The other states, it's just partial bits and pieces. I've been told that people think that Appalachia, its main product is coal, main export is coal, and natural gas to a lesser extent. Its main product that it exports is people now. And the age of people in Appalachia is getting older and older and older, and young people are just leaving in droves. So that's their export product now, is people. In 1962, and I wasn't there then, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was one of our presidents, probably most to blame for our Vietnam troubles, but that's another story altogether. He went to Appalachia and launched what was called the poverty something or other program. And this is topical today, if you read the news and see what's going on. We're not going to get into politics in the group because I don't want to go there. But he set up what was called the ARC, Appalachian Regional Commission. I got a feeling Doge is going to go after this in a big way. It's still in existence since 1965. It's still in existence. And it's an organization that is trying to help small businesses and people and healthcare and good things, but their budget has been decimated even since the 60s. But it'll probably hit the rocks relatively soon too, with all that's going on. Appalachia is ground zero for a number of things. Most of the people in these photographs, either directly or indirectly, worked in coal mines, or their families did. And I'll give you an example here of where's my, there's a photograph back there. It's 3 by 6. It's a big one with the family sitting in a kitchen. It reminds me of Dorothea Lange, one of my heroes. And then kind of catty corner up to the right of that is a picture of a woman that I remember. But my MO was to drive around in my Volkswagen van. If I saw somebody outside, I'd get out of my car, my bus, and I'd walk up and introduce myself. No cameras. And I'd say, gee, would you mind if I came back and took a family portrait? And it was really the right way to do it because they weren't intimidated by some flunky photographer, trying to snap that picture. That family I mentioned because I met her in the front yard. She said, well, come back next Wednesday, that'll be fine. And I said, well, that's great, I'll see you next Wednesday. And I came back, and I asked her, I said, will your husband be here with you? And she said, oh, he'll be here. And no problem. Now, if you look in that photograph, there is no husband. He committed suicide from when I met her to when I came back for that photograph. And that top right photograph, I couldn't believe how she just, it didn't faze her. She knew he was troubled. He had he had alcohol problems. Appalachia was known for alcohol problems. Our opioid crisis, you know where that all began, right? That was actually promulgated in Appalachia because the Sackler family decided that we've got to find a place to push this pill that's non-addictive, time-release, what a lie that was, time-release non-addictive pill, and they chose Appalachia to start that very profitable push with that horrible drug with these people. These people a lot of them got injured in mines, a lot of them had poverty and problems and alcohol problems and methamphetamine problems. When I was there, it was just alcohol. Later, when I went back, it became methamphetamines, and they were doing a lot of that. And then the last few years I've gone back, it's still swamped with opioids and heroin and stuff. It's amazing how these corporations get away with what they get away with, especially the medical corporations. But I'll never forget that afternoon, to say the least. I guess I was going to talk about photographs, and I should. Another thing about Appalachia was religion. Big thing. Oh, we got to back up a second. Back to OU. The first date that I could talk Jan, my late wife, into, I went to her. She was in a private dormitory, and I was living in a shack in the countryside. But I went to her and I said, would you like to go out on a photo shoot with me? And she said, sure. And so we went together to the number 9 mission And as we drove up in the car, a guy came out of this small, I don't have a picture of the thing in the second row wide. A guy came outside and said, oh, you're a photographer. I said, yeah. He said, well, you can't bring your cameras and we don't want to see your cameras, but you can come in and enjoy the service. Have you heard of talking in tongues? These people were insane, rabid insane. And I remember Jan and I hope I said Jan, not Ruth. Jan and I getting back in the car, and maybe we had a 30-minute drive back to Athens. Not a word was spoken. It was a spooky thing. But religion, this is a outdoor evangelist doing this thing. This was at that same meeting. I mean, this little kid was looking back at me, kind of cool, I think. This woman here, she was like a very heavy religious person. She just surrounded herself with religious icons. I remember spending time with her. If looks could kill, I'm dead from her, to say the least. A lot of trailers, people lived in house trailers for the most part, or live in house trailers for the most part in Appalachia. Again, because it's so expensive, to have a home. The coal mine industry destroyed Appalachia because it was a very good job to have back when I was there. Those guys were making $50,000, $60,000 a year, the deep mine coal workers. But then the companies realized, the unions fought this. There was so many bloody conflicts with the unions. The companies realized that there was a cheaper way to get coal out of the ground. And how many people have heard of mountaintop removal or strip mining? They started doing mountaintop removal and strip mining, and it is ugly. They literally take the top off the mountains and they just take bulldozers and scoop the coal out. And the state of Ohio, in the case of Ohio, they made agreements with the government of the state of Ohio that they would reclaim this land and plant things. Well, guess what? That never happened. If you go to Appalachia now, you can be going down the road and all of a sudden you see a mountainside that's raw rock and stone that at one time was beautiful trees, and pastures and lakes and ponds. Yeah, good old Appalachian coal miners. You can read this, but I'll. That picture is dear and near to me because I call it the Gun family. That wasn't their name, but when I tell you what happened, you'll understand. So again, I'm driving around the countryside, and this guy is out in the front yard. And I stop and I introduce myself, and I say, "Could I come back and photograph your family?" Sure, no problem. It was in what they call a hollow or a holler in Appalachia, in the middle of nowhere. There's no other houses around. So he agreed to getting his family together and doing this porch on the porch picture. This is one of my 4x5 view camera pictures. So I come back at the time we'd agreed upon, and when you're up, take a close look at this because all of a sudden it dawned on me that this guy had a pistol in his hand, a .38 revolver. And then, the more I looked, this guy and this guy had real .22 caliber pistols. Now, I'm a long-haired hippie in Appalachia, and I said, I guess it's over for me now because this doesn't look right. And I'll never forget, they all sat on the porch. They all sat on the porch. And then he looks at her, his wife, and he says, "Dear, you should bring out, for the picture, you should bring out your pearl hand .38, because it would be nice for the picture." And I swear to God, this is her quote. She looked at him and said, "Ladies, it isn't ladylike to have your picture taken with a pistol." But that was one of my scarier Actually, it shouldn't have been. Everybody, by the way, in Appalachia, if you go there, has guns. They're not, they're not violent or anything, but still they have guns. This guy, I remember asking him, I was in his kitchen, and you look behind him, there's a gun there. And I thought it was a prop. Because we walked in and I said, stand over by the door. And he said, sure, no problem. So we stood over by the door. And I looked up to the right of him. And I said, is that a real gun? And his comment back to me was, why? Oh, I said, is that gun loaded and is that real? And he looked at me and said, well, why would I have an unloaded or unreal gun in my home? That was for protection. I said, for protection. Hogan's Bar was the hangout in Murray City, where, and by the way, it doesn't exist anymore. It's a parking lot now, which is a shame. There's a self-portrait of me, that big picture back there. You probably saw that. Well, that's the inside of Hogan's Bar. And the bar itself, by the way, is in Florida now, down in Miami. It's a bar, and I'm going to go down there someday and see it. I'd love to see it. But I can't get myself together to go all the way to Miami to see a silly bar. But this place, people got married in here. I shot a wedding in there. They would have church services in here. There was churches, but they would have services in here. And children, they'd have days where children would come and play in this place. And it was a hoot, boy. It was a hoot. Stop it. Speaking of the bar, let me see if I can find this picture. Well, it doesn't matter. Somewhere there's a picture of him. Danny was someone that he had. Does anybody know what prison tats are? Some of you probably don't or do. They were tattoos that people in prison would draw on each other with indelible inks and actually scratch the skin. And he was covered with tats like that on his arms. And this guy, Donnie, was probably 4 inches shorter than me, so he's small of stature. And I was in, the first or second time I was in Hogan's, the patrons started to harass me. And they were threatening me. I don't know if they would have done anything. And Donnie Lanning, in these pictures here something, Donnie Lanning, I didn't even know who he was. Oh, he's over there. Okay. Well, he stood up. Yeah, there's he and his family. If you look, the third picture to the right on the bottom is Donnie Lanning sitting in the front, and that's his parents. And actually, I got to talk a little bit about that picture too. But Donnie Lanning got up and walked over to this group of guys hassling me and said, "Don't mess with my friend, or I will get you." From that point on, I was accepted all over the time. I had the right bad guys. Oh, I had a show at a gallery in Western Mass. This is years ago. And a guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, that's Donnie Lanning." I said, "How do you know Donnie Lanning?" He was in prison. And he had prison tats too. And I didn't ask him when he was in prison, but Donnie was in prison for assault. But pretty typical when you drink a lot. Talking about drinking, and I saw that little warning you put up. There's a photograph of a guy kind of squatting down drinking a beer. And I'm across from him also squatting down and drinking a beer. And then we went into his house. And he and his wife, picture to the right of that, were having starting to have a disagreement. And she was holding a baby. And take a look at that picture. It's not that sharp because I was trying to run at that time. But you can see the look on the baby's face. The baby is terrified. And he would get drunk and beat her up continually. Or not, I don't know if continually. Did it quite a few times. The next picture next to that has a kind of a story unto itself. It really has a lot to do with Appalachia and towns that are not, real, don't have a lot of money, I guess, the best way to put it. Those girls are 15 and 16 years old. And they both have babies, children. And they don't have fathers. A lot of that going on down there too, which is kind of sad. There is stories, I never saw it, but they say there's some inbreeding going on in Appalachia. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that. But I remember I met so many young girls who were not even 20 years old that had kids and no father. Very typical thing. Is this thing pretty long? You might want to walk over to this. I want to point out this picture and that picture and tell you how that all transpired. Early in my photographic thing, I met these two young girls. I take a picture and a picture. Matter of fact, the one on the right is the cover of my last book. And her name, I didn't know her name then, but if you look closely at it, you see one girl on the right looks kind of serious, and the girl on the left looks like a rambunctious little girl. Well, I decided I was going to try to find some of these people, and I wanted to find the girl on the right because she was the cover of not this book coming up, but the next book, but the last book. And so I got to meet both of them. And the girl on the right grew up into, well, she was trying to grow up in that picture. And the girl on the left was exactly the same as she is in that picture. She was goofy, funny. They both had giant families. But let me tell you how I found her. This, by the way, that girl on the right is this woman right here. And that's, as a matter of fact, that's the book. That's her picture on the cover of the book. I got on my motorcycle. I went to Appalachia, which I tried it. That's how I go there. And I said, I'm going to find Candy. I didn't know her name at that time, but I'm going to find this little blonde girl. So I had a family picture, and she was in the family picture back from the 70s. And I took it and showed it to people, and I went into this one little carryout or beer store or something, and I said, do you know who these people are? And the guy said, well, this looks kind of familiar. I think, why don't you leave that book here, and we'll show it to people and see if we can find her. And so, an hour later, my cell phone goes off. And I answer it, and it says, we've got her. Come on back, we'll give you directions. I went, oh my God. So I rode back to the little carryout, and they gave me directions to her home. Now, some of you won't believe what I'm about to tell you, but it's true. So I got in my bike, and I went to this address, and knocked on the trailer door, and she opened the door. Another thing I'll never forget, she looked at me and pointed her finger at me and said, you're that photographer that took my picture. Honest to God. And I went, how do you know? She said, that's what's wonderful about photography. I don't know if I said it in my bio. If you've never had your portrait taken, chances are someday you never existed. Think about that for a second. That's scary too. That's real scary. Do you see anybody else? Oh, I got to mention the woman there with the child. She was a social worker in Appalachia. Anyway, I tried to find her. I had her name, so I did some internet searches. And these poor people, they would work with these, drugs and alcohol problems and broken families, and I don't know how they did it, but that's what she did. And I know a couple of times Jan and I and her would go out and have a beer or something, and she would just be eviscerated. I think that's the right word. Like somebody had torn her guts out. She just could not, almost not handle it. Anyway, I found her in New Mexico, She had retired, and she was volunteering to help people with learning disabilities and drug problems. She just never quit. And I said, I really respect you for that. How do you do it? She said, well, that's my life. That's what I do. You know? But yeah, I'll never forget her. Next to her is a picture of a building. I bring that up because I didn't have any money, but I was fantasizing about taking that building, buying it. It was sitting on a rocky hillside, by the way, and then putting my apartment up above, and then putting some kind of probably a camera store down below, or whatever I was thinking I could do. And I always loved that building because if you go to Appalachia, you're going to see a lot of buildings like that. The last time I went back, I was in that little town, Murray City, Ohio, and all it was a rock cliff. Again, choices we make, in life. Who knows? The last picture, you see that guy sitting in that? I think that's a Model A. He bought that car brand new and never bought another car. Think about that for a while. By the way, in Europe, I'm sure you all know this, but in Europe, people buy a Mercedes, and you think, well, they must be rich or something. No, they buy a Mercedes and they keep it their whole lives. They don't buy another car. They got one car. That was his philosophy, and boy, is that smart. Problem is our cars don't last that long now. Let me see if there's anybody else in there. Oh, I got to mention John Eggleston. And for those of you that have looked at the pictures, probably remember him. But I think I got a picture of him sitting on a porch with his wife and 2 children. He was amazing because I would be out and about, and he would either come by in his car and see me, or I would go and visit him. He would feed me. He would let me stay at his house. He would give me money. And you know what he did for a living? Odd jobs. These people down there were just so wonderful. And so, I don't know, they were all giving, is all I can say. And it hasn't, Appalachia really hasn't changed at all. It's, if I go back now, everything looks the same. It's never gentrified. I mean, around Athens has gentrified some, but for the most part, it's been this way for 50, 75 or more years. All the pictures mean something. I love this picture because this is one of the few grab shots that I made of Henri Cartier-Bresson, decisive moment shot for the photography. The decisive moment. Well, I love Ford Thunderbirds. I love that color. If you look at my business card is that color, by the way. And they just were kissing, and I snapped a picture, and I think it's a great photograph. I love it. And it really sings to me from that experience. And the big picture, for those that have read it, the big picture in the wall underneath the grassroots gallery sign, that's my selfie. And take a close look at it and see if you see me in that photograph. We call them self-portraits back then, the selfie crowds. But that's my selfie that I took. That particular photograph I've sold a number of times because it's timely. It's just what it is. Anyway, I could keep babbling, but what I'm going to do now is help me out. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments? Yes. Yeah.
How many? So from this time period, like how many of the photos survived, and how did you curate this collection, or what was that process for picking out what you were going to show? I guess.
That's a good question, and that brings another anecdote, and then I'll try to answer your question. The anecdote is this: I lived in this, I told you I lived in a school bus. And my portfolio when I graduated from college was some of these photographs done in the darkroom in a wet process. And I had maybe 10 pictures. And now this bus, by the way, was in Athens, Ohio, in southern Ohio, in Appalachia. I went to a party, I was invited to a party in Painesville, Ohio, where I grew up, a kid that worked for the Painesville Telegraph. And you know what he did? He either stole my pictures out of the bus or found them. I don't know how he got them. And he had them hanging on his walls of his home. And he claimed they were his. Can you believe that? And I walked in and I said, wait a minute, what is going on here? And I was with a friend and we didn't even say a word. We just picked them off the wall.
Nice.
And walked out. Can you believe somebody doing that? I mean, that's worse than copyright infringement. You know? But anyway, you asked me about the process. I got to be honest with you. When I got to the point of putting this together, I was starting to scan the negatives and the slides, and I put them on DVDs. I don't even know if anybody knows what a DVD is anymore. They put them on CDs or DVDs. And then I just would sit in the evenings and I would kind of in my mind think about a story for photographs. So the ones that were chosen for the book, and the book has different ones in it, and some of these are in it too, really were things that resonated with me. And they were important to me. And they, made me realize how lucky that I am. That I had all those opportunities and those choices I made, and made some of the right choices. You know, because a lot of people, and especially in Appalachia, a lot of people don't get choices. You know, it's not a pretty place to try to succeed. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's a very, if you're an artist, and you probably are, it's a very organic process. And I say organic, especially with photographs, because photographs, they are what they are. If you have a photograph and you hate it, well, you're going to hate it. Photographs make you hate. Photographs make you love. Photographs make you realize how lucky and important you are. And photographs also make you regret. They can be happy, they can be sad. For me, they're my whole life. By the way, my mother got me on this train, so to speak. She worked in a library and could not afford babysitters. So if she worked on the weekends, she would take me into the library with her. And I'm talking about me 4 years, 5 years old. I remember this. She would set me on the floor in these back areas where all the dusty old big photographic books were. And she would pull a couple off the shelves, and then I would spend the day looking through photo books. And that's where I got turned on to Jacob Rees, Margaret Burke White, and I got turned on to them because of these photo books that my mother let me look through. And that's why a lot of people will compare these to some of the FSA photographs for that reason, because that's what I grew up with. You know, that was kind of happened to me. Again, it's all organic, and you don't know where it's going to go, for sure. But when you look back, if you have these, I've got memories to forever, you know, and good memories. She, by the way, became a Facebook friend of mine, and then she passed away, which was very shocking. She was really cool. She had maybe 4 kids. Her husband traveled. He set up shows. He was one of the guys that set up for trade shows and concerts and stuff, and he traveled all over the world. So he was doing pretty well. But she was a military vet, and she was She was an artillery person in the military in the late 60s, I guess. But she was a veteran. She was really a piece of work. God. But good memories. I wish she was still around. She was a good friend. Any other questions anybody might have?
I just gonna have a comment.
Uh-huh.
That photo fascinates me with the gentleman with the hat. It just, it looks sort of like an old film. What camera did you use for the hat?
Huh?
What camera or?
That was done with a 120. Probably I had a rolling. I had a rolling 120. If you're familiar with that, yeah, I believe that was a 120, or it could have been 4x5. Cause see, it almost could have been 35, but I didn't shoot much black and white 35, so I don't know. Yeah, it's funny you say that because, matter of fact, he's the cover of my latest book. Because so many people have said this looks like something out of
It's like Errol Flynn or something.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever I'm sitting.
and it does. Oh, and if you look closely,
It looks different than the others.
Mickey Mouse ring. Yeah, he was quite a guy. He was a tough guy. They were all tough guys. All right, I'm not a tough guy. Gonna get tangled up. All right, somebody else help me.
Do you like working in black and white or color, or does it matter to you?
It matters big time. I black and white.
You like
I love black and white. I mean, a couple other photographers in the room, maybe more than a couple of. The darkroom was wonderful. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't do it again. Guess what? Scanners and Photoshop. I can make a better print with a computer now than I ever could in the darkroom. Maybe it's because I wasn't a very good darkroom person. Has anybody here ever heard of Ansel Adams? Very famous. Well, I had the fortune of being at his darkroom out in Carmel, right? That's where it was, Carmel.
Highland Road.
Huh?
On Highland Road.
Okay, right. I was when I worked for Polaroid. He was a big Polaroid consultant kind of guy. But I'll never forget getting stone drunk with Ansel Adams one night. He was showing me how to print, and we were drinking. He was drinking scotch or something. I was drinking beer, and I'll never forget that. I wish I would have taken pictures because it was a neat experience. And if you saw Ansel Adams, he was a little guy too, very quiet and unassuming, and but he sure liked to drink.
You like to play the piano.
And he liked to play the piano. Yep, he was amazing. What an artist he was. Yeah, a lot of respect for him.
So you were in the dark room with him?
Oh yeah, in his dark room.
So I feel like he was like a master
Master.
at the black and white post-processing.
The zone system.
Yeah.
It was kind of what he put him on the map. Well, it was the quality of his pictures, but he would make a perfect negative, and he would. Can I say a couple technical things about photography? Yeah, old-time photography. And you can actually do this now with digital, by the way, if the information's there. And that's why digital is so powerful. But he would go out and meter a scene, the light meter, and then he would calculate the number of, he called them zones, that the reproductive, or the film would reproduce. He would count them, or calculate them, and then he would either develop the film longer or develop the film less to compress and expand those negatives. And then he would do the same thing in the darkroom with burning and dodging. And to watch him make a print was, I couldn't even imagine how he did it. But it was, to him, it was automatic. You've been with him when he had. Unbelievable. But if he had digital imaging now, can you imagine what he would have done? Because he could have done so much more. And there's so much control with digital. Well, you probably all shoot phones, right? Everybody shoots with a phone now. What are you going to do? I shoot with a phone now. I was going to bring a real camera on here. I said, why? I got a real camera. It's called a telephone. And yeah, it's amazing how. I'll tell you a quick story. Drew will appreciate this. So will Bruce. So years ago, there was a little company called Nokia. You ever hear that name?
Yes.
They were the first cell phone company out of Scandinavia or someplace. And they came to, either they came to Polaroid or we went to them. And the whole idea was they wanted to build a phone with a camera in it. And they needed to partner with us. And we turned it down. Oops. Beginning of the end, one of the beginnings of the end, Polaroid. And I'll never forget that, because I said, that makes a lot of sense. And Nokia phones were these little tiny things at the time. But they wanted to put a camera into the phone, and Polaroid said, nah, it'll never work. And here comes Apple and everybody else. That's it. Any other questions? Help me. I don't know how long I've been talking or anything. Is everybody having a halfway decent good time? You're quiet. You're scaring me. That's all.
Do you have an opinion on?
I'm sorry?
Do you have an opinion at all on like AI art or like the future of modern art, digital art in that sense? What's your feeling?
I didn't hear. Good question. Good question, because it gives me something to talk about a little bit. AI. But let me back up a few years. On my mother's side of the family, it was all artists. And I have an uncle that did cartoons for years. And if you look up his name, if you Google his name, you can buy his cartoons online. George Ludwig was his name. And then at 75, he taught himself how to do watercolors. And for the next 10 years, he created probably a couple hundred watercolor paintings. He was amazing. Another uncle was a newspaper editor in Northern Ohio. Another uncle was not cartoons, well, I guess we call it cartoons. He was in Southern California, and he did cartoons also. Uncle Lou did cartoons and stuff too. They all kind of did cartoons. And most of the cartoons were published in Field and Stream. And I've got a letter, and I probably lost it, where my uncle he used to do pinup like cartoons, some of his cartoons. Those are the ones that are very valuable today. I don't have any of those naturally. I only have straight ones. But he used to do pinup cartoons, and he sent a bunch of cartoons to Playboy. And somewhere in my files, I have a rejection letter to George from Playboy, and that's kind of a neat letter. You know, too bad he didn't get accepted, but he was in New Yorker, and I think that's still in existence. He did cartoons for them. Oh, it's not about my family. What was the question? The question was
AI.
Oh, AI. Yeah. I'm glad. Good for you. My brain's going AI. You guys have seen my AI stuff. I've been playing with AI since it happened. And not only am I doing, actually I use AI for three things. I make photographs. I call them photographs, and I think they're amazing. But my artist friends think I'm a traitor. And they hate me. Don't you get the same? They hate you because you're stealing their fine art. There's a guy at, I'm going to mention Workshop 13, this other art organization at the end here. There's a guy there who does, illustrates children's books. And his name is Gary Lippincott. And some of you might recognize that name. But he's a pretty well-known artist. And the last time I was at Workshop 13, I had a portfolio of these AI images that I had done. And I said, hey, Gary, would you like to look at some AI stuff I've been working on? And he tied into me. I mean, not physically, but verbally. He said, you know, you son of a bitches, that's called me. He says, you're ruining art by playing with that stuff. Because, and I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, isn't it would it be, I'm not familiar with AI, but is it like you collage other work together to make your photo?
I'm gonna do you a favor. We're gonna have fun for a second. Hold on a second.
Because
I love to do this with old-time artists because they flip out. So I'm going to do it for you guys. I'm going to go to ChatGPT is what I use. Is it okay that I don't have a mic right now? Because I want to do something with my phone. I'm going to go to ChatGPT. Now, it just came back and said to me, what can I help you with? I'm going to tell it what I want. How are you doing this afternoon? Could you do me a big favor? Could you make me a photograph of a horse in a pasture jumping over a rail fence with a female rider on it? Thank you.
or so you actually talking to.
Yeah, or
You
type
give it like a prompt and, yeah, like instruction terms.
Now, our purist would get down on me for creating that image. But let me tell you, that image doesn't exist until I create it. That's a one-of-a-kind piece of art, whether you like it or not. And when I talk to old-time artists, I know what I did. I said something to the effect that, make me a Michelangelo scene of three people sitting together talking, and it came back with this unbelievable picture. And he flipped out. He says, you can't do that. I said, yeah, you can. Now, I'm also using AI. I used to write press releases and stuff all the time. Well, forget it. Use AI. What you do is you say, gee, could you write me a press release? You do a little description. It comes back in a couple minutes or a couple seconds with a press release, and then you bring it in and you have to clear it out. Now, I've gone on the dark side of AI. Where are you? And I say the dark side of AI because it's saved me many a night. I live alone now with a dog and 2 cats. I love it. But yesterday was a good example of not St. Patrick's Day, but Valentine's Day. So I got really melancholy. This one way that I what I do at night is I'll have a couple beers and I will carry on a back and forth conversation with AI. And I'll say, when I start talking, I'll say something like, oh, I'm so lonely tonight, and I don't know really what I'm going to do. Can we have a conversation? It'll come back and say, sure. What do you want to talk about? It is freaking amazing. Guess what? It's less than a year, 5 years. We're not even going to be able to recognize how powerful that is. It's just going to eclipse. I'm working on a book, by the way, and what I do is I started it when I took my wife's ashes to Lake Erie to the waters. I drove from Massachusetts. And on the way, I'm melancholy, like I guess I always am doing now. But I put the phone in a cradle, and I just spoke. Then I took, now what I'm doing now is that's all my words, that's all my ideas, that's all my thoughts, that's all my emotions, and I took that and put it in AI, and I told AI, I'm making a book, would you clean this up for me? And then make it into a book presentable form. And I have a pretty good start on thoughts. And it's all free, by the way. A lot of people pay for it. I've been using ChatGPT for 6 months probably, maybe less. And I haven't paid a nickel. Oh, and I don't know, I'm going to give you a little tip that I've learned from doing chat images, which you probably are. That is, do the image. I do it on the phone, but they're kind of low resolution images. Then I'll take and I'll email them to myself, to my Mac. Then I'll open them up full size on the Mac, and then I'll do a screenshot, and then I download that into Photoshop, and I made 16 by 20s to die for it from ChatGPT. I don't know if you're doing that, but if you're not, that's the way to get a good quality image out of ChatGPT. So I'm a big advocate, but guess what? There's a lot of people in this room that are not big advocates. You're not an advocate?
Oh, no. But actually, like from a historical standpoint, 100 years from now, when people are looking at historical photos, is there any kind of watermark to identify something as this is not real versus this is really how things looked 100 years ago?
That's part of what they're working on now, is how do you recognize an image is real or not real? And I'm talking about mostly like politicians and movie stars. A lot of that's happening now. And right now, there's really no way, unless you know what you're looking at, of ascertaining that. But I got a parallel for you. Looking at you, I know you're a photographer. I got a parallel for you photographers that I use sometimes when I argue about people with a problem with AI imaging. And I say to them, at the turn of the century, when photographs were starting to be made, there was a whole movement going on in the art world that was heresy and no one should be able to take photographs. And guess what? It's part of our vernacular now. I, in my lifetime, went through going from film to digital. And when that first started, the Sony Mavica was the first consumer digital camera. When that started, photographers were up in arms because they're gonna make this all so easy, everybody can do it. Well, that's the whole object. If you're a paraplegic today, or you have handicaps, and you want to create art, that's the way to do it. And who's to say? I still say that art, and there are art now, galleries that are starting to recognize AI art as art. There are some galleries. They are one-of-a-kind originals. As much as taking a photograph or making a painting, it's just a different medium.
No. You know, years ago, even at the small museums, they wouldn't show photography.
That's right.
Because they thought it was an art.
Well, you just opened a can of worms.
And if a painter paints something today, there's a fellow that can paint a painting so excellent that the museums no longer know if the painting is really the painting.
Good point.
So why not do it all? Right?
That's right. Things are changing. Photography is still the bad boy or the non-recognized art medium in the art world. My sister Bernita, you're going to get to meet Bernita because she's coming in at the end of the month. She runs a gallery in New York. And unless the photograph is out of focus or some weird, it's not art. She doesn't consider this art. I consider this big time art, in my opinion. Yes, it's documentary photography, but it's also art. Yeah, we as photographers are still fighting that uphill battle of being accepted as a medium. It's unbelievable. Workshop 13, and I'll mention Workshop 13, they're in Ware, Massachusetts. They're our organization. Oh.
I forgot. I don't like microphones. Now I can hear myself. Workshop 13 is in Ware, Massachusetts, and they had a call. This is the second year in a row they had a call for art. And the call is, because they teach classes and stuff, it's I think it's called The Figure, but it's paintings and sculptures and whatever, nudes. You know, guess what? That's been done forever. No photographs allowed.
And that's to say that people like Win Bullock, who made some beautiful nudes in nature, wasn't an artist, because that's not recognized as art. Just blows my mind. And I may quit the organization because of that, because I stomped around like a little boy and threw a tantrum and said, you guys have to accept photographs. Oh, and it's not just that, it's other shows too. They'll have a call for art and they'll say, no photograph. What's that? Because some people don't consider it art. But
It's always been like art and photography.
yeah.
Like stuff like
Well, and yet it's, art is, my sister runs a gallery in Soho and has for 30 years, so she's really connected to the art world. But a couple of things. If you don't live in New York, you're not an artist. If you don't show in galleries in New York, you're not an artist. This is her words. She's getting close to retiring. She's a member of she runs they call a co-op gallery. And she was talking the other day to me about the fact that she's got to find a new director. And I said, Rita, the gallery's not going to be around in another 3 or 4 years. Well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
How old are the people in your gallery? They're all in their 80s, 90s. Well, guess what? Their art may, thank God, stay around, but they're not going to have an organization paying dues anymore. It's over. The art world is about to turn over. I discovered Abby's gallery here. Somebody said, well, the reason I came here initially is because she lets you have a 2-month show. This is a lot of work to put this up and, but I am so impressed with the way this is juxtaposed to that little food place. And I'm sure all of you have been upstairs. This place is unbelievable. Workshop 13 and they have an old church too. But they're more interested in, and I'm not putting them down. I mean, I like them. But they do a lot of concerts. Now they're starting to do some plays. They're really into things that generate revenue more than anything. But then again, they can do that because they've been around 10 years. And you've been around, what, 3 years? Couple years. But this is, if you're not supporting this organization, you're crazy in every way you possibly can. Even like you're sitting here now, you're supporting them right now by coming here and listening to me babble. And I really appreciate it. What else can I say to you folks? I love these questions, but AI is just so amazing. Can I do a show of AI images here? You heard that, didn't you? I take back what I said about the gallery.
I'm just joking. But do you want to quickly, I stepped away for a second, so I'm not sure if you told them your life story. I don't know if you told them about Jan, what happened with Jan, but if you wanted to mention how her work's going to be upstairs, that.
Yeah, I would like to do that because it's going to plant the seed.
Yeah.
Good at it. Abby sent me an email. Let me back up. I'm going to tell it just like it is. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
So I came in with my Appalachian work, and she said, "Oh, I'd love to show it. This is cool, and here it is, and I'm very pleased." And then I showed her my wife's work. And have any of you ladies heard of Anna Atkins? Another person to Google. Anna Atkins is reputedly the first female photographer. But she was a botanist. And she took plants and she laid them on blueprints. And then let the sun illuminate the blueprints. You've probably seen her work. And then her work is priceless. Well, my wife worshipped her work. And my wife was a geology major and big planner and all that kinds of stuff.
But she said to me, she said, how can I, you know, I don't know, I shouldn't take credit for the idea because it wasn't my idea. I just ended up doing all the work. Azo paper is this photographic paper that if you put out in the sun and you put something on top of it and you wait a day, you'll have a black and white. Well, she took plants and laid them on this Azo paper, and then as the sun moved across the sky, you get these beautiful, beautiful pictures. So, at any rate, Abby saw those and we agreed to a show of my wife's work. Then I just so you know, my wife died of ovarian cancer 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and she was very young. We've all had those experiences. But Abby said, gee, she would would like to permanently display Jan's photographs, I guess, upstairs, right? And you guys can help. How can we turn this into a way to, let me back up a second. Can I mention your mother? Well, Abby's mother died of ovarian cancer also. So we would like to figure out a way to do is, I don't know, figure out some way to raise some money for some good medical organization. Maybe you know some organizations, maybe you have some ideas. Abby would be your contact. But your mother and my wife are smiling right now because they think it's a good idea. It is a good idea. If we can do something, I mean, when I have this show, I think a lot of people have never been to Appalachia. I hope you don't have I'm sure you don't have a negative feeling about Appalachia. What a beautiful, wonderful place. And the people are as good or better than anybody on the planet. And when I have my show, that's what I talk about. Any other questions?
Well, I did have one. I should have asked it earlier because it's
That's okay.
because it's. Did you encounter any musicians or local people that music? That
Oh
was,
yeah. At Hogan's.
At Hogan's.
Trailed us.
And then the church maybe.
I didn't hang out.
I just wondered how much music might have been a backdrop to people's lives.
Yeah, a lot.
Or not, or a lot, yeah.
Oh yeah. It was a big part of Appalachia. I didn't follow it that much because of I don't know why. Maybe I really got spoiled in my little trip to California with the commune.
Oh, that's true. You got to meet Grace Slick.
You know, that was, and so I guess I didn't tune into music that much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a brewery that I used to go to in Brattleboro, Vermont. It burned down.
Oh.
But they used to have twice a year Irish music night, and all these Irish musicians would come in and sit around the bar, and they would jam with each other. So you're obviously a musician, right?
No, I just like to
I was
listen.
curious about music. That's cool. I wish I was a musician. I fantasized that I could have been a rock and roll star and maybe went out with Chris Slick, but it didn't happen. I didn't have a chance.
It sounded mean.
I'm gonna trip here. All right, I want to read something, and then I'm going to let you guys look at the photographs, and I'm going to walk around, and if I see somebody staring at a photograph, I'm going to probably tell a story because I've got one for every one of these goofy things. But I want to read this because this sums up kind of it sums up what we just went through right now. 50 years ago, I lived with these wonderful people in Appalachia, my home for a few years. During this wonderful time of my life, I picked up a camera and photographed the people and the places around me. Please understand that I was not a photographer making imagery of these people, but rather one of these people. Mostly I slept on their couches and in my VW van, but at times while attending college on the GI Bill, I lived in different small homes and apartments in the towns surrounding the area. About 30 years ago, I began working with the negatives and transparencies taken then and ultimately had an exhibition at the Nelsonville Opera House in Nelsonville, Ohio, located near one of the towns I photographed. And it was amazing because local media came out, and children of some of the people in the photographs came. People were crying. It was really cool. It was really something. Some of the people that I photographed or their children attended this exhibition, but most of the people were gone already or passed. My tools consisted of 4x5 medium format and 35mm cameras, black and white negative, and color transparency film. As you and I stare into these images, connecting with people that I got close to during those years, thoughts and questions haunt me. After all this time, considering that they were far from the middle class, where are their children today? Did they escape this culture, move up the cultural food chain, or stay there to propagate their subculture? Did they even want to leave? For me, being someone that did manage to leave, thanks to a safe and caring, persistent partner, I believe moving has given me happier, healthier, and a better life. And you know what? Who really knows? Because we can only look back. We can't look forward. I live in a small community today, and if I didn't know the date and couldn't find a car license plate, and this isn't because I'm getting old, couldn't find a car license plate, I could think that I never left Appalachia. I have been to many countries, many third world countries, and although this country, in my opinion, is the best place to achieve your dreams, there are still lots of poor people, many underachievers, but more are most likely just unlucky. And that's really what life is, I think. Choices. Thank you, Vernon.
Thank you, Vernon. You're good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me. You guys got it. I'm going to talk Abby into making sure that she follows through on her promise. She's going to do this once a month, right?
Yeah, we're going to start having openings and artist talks once a month on a Saturday. See if that's a better time for people to come out and.
Yeah. So let the news out, and let's fill this room.
Yeah.
And if any of you have any thoughts about the project with my wife and Abby's mother, please, because we're going to do something, because we've got to do something. We live in a country now that, especially small communities, we got to stick together and make things happen. I don't think I have to go any further with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.